It was a sweltering summer afternoon on the outskirts of Paris. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting a warm golden hue over the rooftops, when N'Golo Kanté, enjoying a rare break from his demanding schedule, decided to visit an old childhood friend in the Montreuil neighborhood. Ever modest, he wore simple clothes, a cap pulled low over his face, and walked with his hands tucked into his pockets, blending in like any other passerby. Though his fame followed him wherever he went, in this part of town, he was just the quiet, respectful kid from around the block, the one everyone admired not just for what he did on the pitch, but for who he was beyond it. As he strolled down the narrow streets, exchanging greetings with familiar faces, a strange scent in the air made him pause. Smoke. Not the pleasant kind from a backyard barbecue, but something thicker, more urgent. As he quickened his pace, the smell intensified, heavy and sharp. Then came a sound that sliced through the afternoon air. A sharp crack, followed by the shattering of glass. Turning the corner, he was met with a scene that froze him in place for half a second. A modest two-story house with flames bursting from the upper windows. Thick black smoke was curling skyward in ominous waves. Without a second thought, he broke into a run. A few neighbors had gathered at a safe distance, some shouting, others simply frozen in place. From inside the house came muffled screams. Near the front gate, a woman was trying to restrain a young girl who was screaming in sheer panic. Her face was streaked with tears and soot. "Bolina! Bolina's still inside! He doesn't know how to get out!" she cried between sobs. Her small hands clung desperately to the bars of the gate. Kanté rushed up. "Is anyone inside?" he asked, breath short, voice firm. The woman pointed to the upper floor, her hand trembling uncontrollably. "My daughter, and our dog. Please, help them." There was no hesitation. He darted to the front door, which was slightly ajar, heat already radiating from within. The air was thick and heavy, but still passable. He pulled his shirt over his nose and crouched low as he stepped inside, guided by instinct and the desperate sounds echoing from above. The ground floor was already being swallowed by smoke. He moved fast, barely glancing at the flickering flames licking at the furniture. At the top of the stairs, he heard a faint bark, followed by a child's whimper. He followed the sound to the back of the hallway and pushed a door open with his shoulder. Inside, crouched beneath a bed, was a little girl shaking with fear, clutching a small dog tightly to her chest. The dog, Bolina, stood protectively in front of her, growling softly at the heat. "Hey, it's all right now. I'm here to take you out," Kanté said, crouching beside them. The girl looked up, eyes wide, a glimmer of recognition cutting through her fear. "Are you Kanté?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He smiled gently. "Yes, it's me. But we have to go now. Trust me, okay?" The fire was already cracking through the doorframe. The ceiling popped with tension. He lifted the girl into one arm, cradled the dog in the other, and turned toward the hallway, now a tunnel of smoke. The staircase groaned underfoot as he descended, embers drifting through the air like sparks in a storm. Just as he reached the final step, part of the railing gave way behind him, but he was already at the exit. With one last burst of strength, he charged through the front door, pushing it open with his shoulder as a wave of hot air crashed into him. The crowd gasped as he emerged, soot-covered, coughing but alive, with a child and a dog held tightly in his arms. He dropped to his knees on the lawn, lungs burning, vision blurry. But he was smiling. The girl leapt from his arms and ran into her mother's embrace. Bolina barked excitedly, wagging his tail as if sensing he was safe again. A firefighter hurried over and knelt beside him. "You're insane," the man said, half laughing, half shocked. Kanté looked back at the burning house, catching his breath. "I couldn't leave them in there," he replied. "No one should face the fire alone." Smoke still lingered in the air above Montreuil, even as the last flames were extinguished and the fire trucks began to pull away. The crowd that had gathered in disbelief was now buzzing with awe and admiration. What they had just witnessed wasn't a scene from a film. It was real. N'Golo Kanté, known worldwide for his humble presence on the football field, had just risked his life to save a little girl and her dog. And now, sitting on the curb with his shirt torn and his face streaked with ash, he looked more like a man trying to catch his breath than a national hero. Amina, the little girl he had saved, clung to his arm, while Bolina lay quietly at his feet, tail wagging weakly. Her mother knelt in front of him, still in shock, tears rolling down her cheeks. "You saved my baby. You saved both of them. How do I ever thank you?" Kanté gave a small, reassuring smile. "They're safe. That's all that matters." A paramedic approached with an oxygen mask, urging him to get checked in the ambulance. "You inhaled a lot of smoke. You should come with us just to be sure." Kanté nodded quietly and stood, still a little unsteady. As he walked toward the ambulance, the people around him began to applaud. It wasn't loud or frenzied. It was respectful, full of gratitude. A quiet, honest acknowledgement of what he had just done. Inside the ambulance, while medics checked his vitals and cleared his lungs, his thoughts stayed with the girl and the dog. "They were so small," he murmured to one of the EMTs. "They didn't know what to do. I just couldn't walk away." The medic, moved, replied, "Most people would have, but you didn't." News of the rescue spread like wildfire. A neighbor's video, capturing the moment Kanté emerged from the flames with Amina and Bolina, was shared online within minutes. By nightfall, it was on every major news outlet in France, and by morning across the world. Headlines praised his heroism. Football star becomes real-life hero. Interviews were requested. TV hosts wanted to tell the story, but Kanté stayed quiet. He didn't answer calls. He didn't post online. He simply went back to his routine. When reporters caught up with him outside the training grounds, he gave a short, sincere answer. "There was a child in danger. I couldn't wait." That was all he said. His club, however, made a public statement, praising his bravery. The president of the team held a press conference, calling Kanté a role model and pledging to support the family whose home had been destroyed. Fans rallied to support them as well, launching a fundraiser that reached its goal in less than a day. Builders, electricians, painters, many of them supporters of the club, volunteered to help rebuild the house. The whole neighborhood came together around that moment. Kanté, staying true to his nature, visited the site quietly. He brought food for the workers, tools when needed, and sometimes just helped without saying much. Children would gather when he arrived, not because he was a star, but because they felt safe with him. Amina clung to him as if he were part of the family now. She drew pictures of him, Bolina, and herself, sometimes standing in front of fire, other times playing football. Her favorite one had a speech bubble above him that said, "Don't worry, I've got you." Not everyone, however, applauded. Some pundits questioned his decision to enter the burning house. "It was reckless," one commentator said on live television. "He could have been killed. A player of his level. His responsibility is to stay safe." Others accused him of chasing publicity, despite the fact that he hadn't spoken publicly about the incident at all. Kanté didn't respond to any of it. He focused on training, helping the family, and living as quietly as always. The local school where Amina was enrolled decided to create a project called Everyday Heroes. Kanté was the first person they talked about. Children wrote essays and made artwork about courage, kindness, and putting others before yourself. The walls of the classroom were filled with their work. One child wrote, "Kanté is what I want to be when I grow up, not because he's a footballer, but because he's brave and good." Eventually, the mayor of Montreuil invited Kanté to an official ceremony to recognize his courage. He declined the invitation at first. "I didn't do it for awards," he told the mayor over the phone. But then he received a handwritten note in a small envelope from Amina. Inside it said, "Dear Kanté, please come to the ceremony. I want everyone to know that you saved me. I want to hug you in front of everyone so they see what a real hero looks like. Love, Amina." He couldn't say no to that. The ceremony took place a few weeks later in the town square. Colorful flags hung from buildings. Children wore shirts with Kanté's name written in marker. A massive banner read, Merci Kanté, notre héros. When he arrived, dressed simply as always, the crowd erupted in applause. But it was Amina who ran to him first, throwing her arms around his waist. She gave him a bracelet she had made out of colorful beads. This has my name and Bolina's, so you don't forget us. He put it on without hesitation. The mayor gave a short speech presenting Kanté with the town's Medal of Honor. Kanté took it in his hand, then looked down at Amina. Without a word, he placed the medal around her neck. The audience fell silent, then erupted in cheers. Later, as people took photos and shared stories, Kanté stood quietly beside Amina and Bolina. The three of them, so different in size and shape and story, but bound together by something powerful, a moment of choice, made in the face of fire. What began as a quiet afternoon had become something unforgettable. Not just for the people of Montreuil, but for anyone who needed proof that heroes still walk among us, wearing old sneakers, a quiet smile, and a heart big enough to carry others through the flames. The days turned into weeks, and the story of N'Golo Kanté's heroic rescue slowly faded from the headlines, but not from the hearts of those it had touched. In Montreuil, his name became more than just a memory or a moment. It became a presence. Not the kind shouted in stadiums or printed on jerseys, but the kind whispered by parents to their children at bedtime. Be kind. Be brave. Be like Kanté. The rebuilt house stood quietly on the same street, its fresh white walls gleaming in the sunlight. In the front yard, Amina was playing again, her laughter ringing through the neighborhood as Bolina chased her around a new garden planted by volunteers. There were daisies, sunflowers, and a small olive tree, a symbol of resilience, gifted by Kanté himself. He still visited often, always unannounced. Sometimes he stayed for tea. Other times he helped with small repairs or read books with Amina. On quiet afternoons, they sat on the porch, watching the wind move through the leaves. He never brought up the fire. Neither did she. But they both understood that something deep and lasting had been born that day, a bond neither flame nor time could undo. One afternoon, Amina handed him a scrapbook. "This is everything I remember," she said shyly. Inside were photos, drawings, and notes. One page had a sketch of him holding her and Bolina in his arms, walking through fire. Another showed them sitting on the porch eating ice cream. "You're part of our family now," she whispered. Kanté looked at her, then at her mother, who nodded with tears in her eyes. "We owe you everything." "No," he said softly. "You gave me something too." Meanwhile, the local school where Amina studied held its first annual Day of Courage. The students dressed as everyday heroes, firefighters, nurses, teachers, and yes, one or two wore football jerseys with Kanté written on the back in crayon. That day, Amina stood on stage and told the story herself. She didn't cry. She spoke with strength. "He didn't have to help me. He didn't have to risk his life, but he did. And he didn't ask for anything in return. That's what being brave means." The town also unveiled a mural on the side of the local community center. It showed Kanté holding Amina and Bolina, stepping through smoke, surrounded by warm colors. Above it were the words, "No one should face the fire alone." When they invited Kanté to see it, he stood quietly in front of the wall for a long time. He didn't say much. Just smiled, hands in his pockets, and whispered, "They got Bolina just right." Months passed. The media moved on. But not Montreuil, not Amina, and not Kanté. He kept training, kept playing, kept living with the same humility. He declined interviews about the fire. He turned down awards. When asked by a journalist what he remembered most about that day, he answered simply, "Her hand holding mine." That was enough. One rainy evening, after a game, he checked his phone on the way home. A voice message from Amina was waiting. "Hi, Kanté. I scored a goal today at school. It was really cool. I imagined you were cheering. Also, Bolina ate my sandwich again. We miss you. Come by soon, okay?" He smiled in the dark of the car, listening to the message again. And again. As the streetlights flickered through the window, he thought of how the world often chased glory, noise, and headlines. But the real victories, the ones that mattered, were quiet. They were made of choices, of instinct, of kindness, of carrying someone out of the fire because you know no one should be left behind. And so, as the city buzzed and moved and lived, N'Golo Kanté, hero, friend, neighbor, remained exactly what he had always been, a light in the quiet, a reminder that courage doesn't wear armor or demand applause. Sometimes, it just walks calmly into the smoke and walks others back into the light.